Welcome to a virtual meeting of the Space Coast chapter of INCOSE. I'm Scott Tilley, the chapter president. This meeting was supposed to take place on August 2nd, but unfortunately we had some issues with accessibility to the library, reflecting the fact that students aren't back in class yet. We truly are in the dog days of summer. Now, as a reminder, INCOSE is a membership-driven not-for-profit. It's been around for a number of years. There's two major meetings each year in addition to our chapter meetings. There's a workshop that takes place early in the year, typically January, and an annual symposium. Unfortunately, it is the symposium that we were going to be talking about at our meeting this week. There's also two publications that are of interest to someone who's in academia or a practicing professional. One is a journal called Systems Engineering, and one is a quarterly newsletter called Insight. Both of these are some of the advantages you gain if you actually become a supporting member of INCOSE, which I'd encourage you to do. The Space Coast chapter of INCOSE is built up of a number of people on the board of directors. I'm the president. Steve Ratz is vice president. Macaulay Osese is the secretary. We currently have an open position for treasurer. The other folks that you see listed are directors with their years of service indicated. As a volunteer-driven organization, we were always looking for people to step up and help run the organization. All of us are volunteers, and we are only as good as the folks who take part. Now, everyone knows I like Dilbert, and since we're talking about systems engineering, it was very interesting that a recent Dilbert cartoon, thank you Scott Adams, was talking about artificial intelligence. And in this panel, Dilbert says to Alice that he added artificial intelligence to the coffee maker. Now the coffee maker is using guilt to manipulate people into making a fresh pot if they take the last cup, which happens in a lot of offices. And the last panel shows the coffee maker talking to Wally, saying, "You disgust me," because he's taken the last cup. And Wally just says, "I get that a lot." Now, I was thinking about some of the definitions of systems engineering recently. This is a screenshot from the United States Military Academy at West Point. And they have a program in systems engineering, and I would encourage you to go take a look at their website. It talks about the curriculum and some of the core courses, the faculty involved, the projects that are being undertaken at West Point. Very interesting. So they define systems engineering as designing integrated solutions to complex problems. Keep that definition in mind when we talk about our book in a few moments. There's also a program at West Point on engineering management. In engineering management, they talk about key phrases such as project management, operations, integration, the management of technology, life cycle costs, all very important. So these are sort of two aspects of engineering management, if you like, systems engineering and the engineering management component. It actually mimics or parallels the structure of the engineering systems program until recently at Florida Tech. Now, this is the dog days of summer. We did not have a meeting last month. And as my dog here, Watson, might ask, what have you been doing? What have you been doing over the last several weeks related to systems engineering? Now, one thing I certainly hope you've been doing is working on your chapter submission to our book. Remember, the book is called Perspectives on Systems Engineering from Florida Space Coast. We are accepting work up until September 21st because basically we've given you the whole summer to work on things. So that means you've got a little over a month and a few weeks to work on things. If you want to send me a draft or some notes or questions on it, I will do my best to provide feedback to you. For those of you working in industry, remember you may need to get approval or sign off from some folks in your company. So build that into your budget, your time budget. This is the very first time we're doing this sort of thing, and we're really looking forward to having a great publication. And hopefully it'll all be done and published by the end of the year. It'll be available in both print and Kindle formats. All royalties from the sales of the book will flow exactly back to our Space Coast chapter. Now, if you're thinking about where do you go for some seminal reading on systems engineering, you can't go wrong with this book. Gerald Weinberg wrote a great book many years ago called An Introduction to General Systems Thinking. You can find it used or on Amazon, of course. It's still a really, really good read. I came across a very different take on systems engineering from IBM. It's called Systems Engineering for Dummies, part of the Dummies series. But you know, some of those Dummies books are actually pretty interesting. So you can look at systems engineering from multiple perspectives, and there's many, many other texts available to you and good online resources. Speaking of online resources, we now have a Facebook page, but we need more members. In fact, this video you're listening to is on Facebook. So join the group, spread the word. This is how we'll get the word out about everything good we're doing. Now I can answer the question, what have you been doing for myself over the last couple of months since we last met? I released my 21st book called Make Technology Great Again. And as several people asked, did I actually go there with the hat and the text? Indeed I did. This is a collection of my newspaper columns from Technology Today from last year. But I'm very pleased. 21 books means I'm now an adult, I guess, in books. In terms of travel, a couple weeks ago, I was actually in, where is this place? This is Quebec City up in Canada. I was there on the hottest day of the year in Quebec City. It was 95 degrees, which is really interesting because I happened to be up in Montreal at wintertime when it was 37 below. So I've now been there for the coldest and the hottest times of the year. I don't know how I time these things. Quebec City was a beautiful place. I was staying at that hotel, which is the Chateau Frontenac, an historic place. More local and related, believe it or not, to systems, a couple weeks ago, I was at a concert over at the Plaza in Orlando for the legendary rock band Yes. They are celebrating their 50th anniversary together. Now, how in the world does this relate to systems? Well, it turns out that August 1st, 1981, the band The Buggles released the song Video Killed a Radio Star on MTV. This was the very first video that MTV ever played. The reason why it's of interest to Yes fans is that The Buggles is only a duo. Trevor Horn, the singer, and Jeff Downs, who plays keyboards. Jeff Downs is now the keyboardist for Yes. In fact, I saw him on stage at the great show they put on. And did video kill the radio star? Indeed it did. If you did not have a video in the 80s, your band was going nowhere. Now, if we skip forward several decades, what's affecting things these days? Well, I covered it in my newspaper column this past Friday, and that has to do with streaming. And I believe right now, if you are a musician, you are being negatively impacted by streaming. If video killed the radio star, then streaming and the internet has killed the music star. That's one of the reasons why bands like Yes have to keep touring. The whole system has changed such that they don't make almost any money from the recordings anymore. I mean, who buys CDs? We only listen to the millions of songs available for streaming, but the royalties are far less. In fact, it's not even the big record companies that control the music industry anymore. It's the tech giants. The meeting we were supposed to have on Thursday would have featured Joseph Bradley talking about a trip report to the INCOSE International Symposium that took place in July in DC. He had a couple events that he took part in. I hope to be able to reschedule Joe's talk because he had a lot of really interesting things to say, and the symposium is one of the biggest events for INCOSE. Now, the last thing to note is that next month, we will have a joint meeting between the Space Coast chapter of INCOSE and the IEEE Melbourne and Canaveral chapters. Still the same time, September 6th. Still the same time and date, 6 p.m., September 6th. However, we are moving venues for this talk. We will be over in the Olin Engineering Auditorium, Olin 118. And the presentation is called Scaling Agility, a story of practical growth and value. And the speaker is Dave West. He's the CEO and product owner at scrum.org. So he's a very sought-after speaker. The topic should be of great interest to everyone working in software and systems engineering because working in an agile environment is all the rage these days. I will send out a note about this in the future to remind everyone of this important event. Now, my last closing note to everyone is please don't leave your work for our book to the last minute. By the next meeting on September 6th, you'll be down to only a few weeks to go. Look for mail in the future, and have a great weekend.